Welcome to today's podcast. Today we have Stan Stutzman of the U.S. Army. So first off, I want to just thank you for your service, and could you give us a little bit of background of your service?
Okay, so in the summer of 1968, I had graduated from high school, and I got a letter from my uncle in Washington, D.C. that said, "You are drafted, my young man." So I went to Des Moines, Iowa. I was living in Iowa at the time, and got a physical. And while I was there, the recruiters talked to me and said, you could join instead of being drafted, and then you might not go to Vietnam and be in the infantry. So I enlisted in that summer, and I was in a special branch of the U.S. Army called the Army Security Agency, which I don't think exists anymore either. But anyway, in October of 1968, I entered boot camp, and then I served for 43 months. So in April of 1972, I finished.
Yeah, what made you go into the military? You got drafted.
I got drafted, that's correct.
Okay.
So then I enlisted so that I could have some control. At that time, they allowed you to pick a little, you could choose what you were trained in.
I think that's still a thing where you get to
still a thing,
choose.
Yeah. Do you know about MOS, military occupational status?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've heard
so
of that.
each person then you get trained as a certain thing, and I was an 05H20 was my designation, which was a high-speed Morse intercept operator. So I spent my time listening. I had two radios and a typewriter in front of me, and I listened to Morse code and typed it out on a typewriter. That's what I did.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So you're a code cracker almost.
Almost. I provided the information to the code crackers.
Okay.
So, for instance, when I went to Vietnam, I was in the very northern part of the country, and we had a huge antenna there, and so we listened to the Viet Cong, the North Vietnamese Army, and other groups in the area. So that's how we provided information for strategic planning and so forth.
You served for, how long did you serve?
43 months, so it was like 3 years and a few months.
Okay. What did you learn from in the military?
Well, I was quite young. I was 18 when I went in, so I learned a lot about life and how to take care of myself and how to be away from my family. And I think I learned a little bit about the world and got to travel. I spent 36 of those 43 months in Southeast Asia, so that was quite that was a fun and enlightening experience.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
very beautiful.
Learn
place.
about other cultures. Yeah, so
where did you go?
where did I go? I went to Japan first. And I went to the northernmost part of Japan, the island of Hokkaido, and I spent some time there. And then in the spring, that was in 1969, actually, by the time I'd gotten training and so forth. And then I went to Vietnam in the spring of 1970 for the invasion of Cambodia. I don't know if you know your Vietnamese history, but there was a time when the U.S. Decided to chase groups into Cambodia. I went there for that operation, so I was there around 7 months. And then I went back to Japan, stayed there for a while longer, and then I spent my last year in Thailand.
Thailand.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was very interesting. Geographically, I was directly, let's see if I get my directions right, I was directly west of where I had been in Vietnam, so I was at the same latitude, latitude, just a little bit to the, only a few hundred miles actually to the west.
Oh, so you're pretty nearby.
Yeah, pretty nearby, and so I had basically the similar mission, because it was so close.
What was your role in the military?
Well, I was a high-speed Morse intercept operator, so my role was to complete that. Yeah, it was I had to have a security clearance, a high top secret crypto security clearance. So I can't really say too many details about that, but yeah, that was my job in the time that I spent in from training on. That's what I did.
What was your favorite part, funniest, and worst part of boot camp?
Yeah, I think the thing that I learned from boot camp, and I think the thing that we think about militarily in boot camp is that they really kind of strip you down to the basic, but build by the time you finish. 10 weeks later, there's a certain camaraderie and unity and shared purpose. I think that it's kind of surprising how it can happen that fast.
They break you down and build you back up.
Build you back up, and then you're a team. You're ready to go as part of a unit rather than an individual, which is different than a lot of our culture.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so let's see, what funny things happened. A lot of funny things happened, of course, but yeah. I'll tell you one story. So right at the end of my time, I got sick. And actually, when I went after boot camp finished, I went home and I had the measles, and so the 2 weeks that I got to spend at home after boot camp, I was sick. But right before that, we had graduation day. Just before that, and a couple of us weren't well enough to go to the ceremony, the graduation ceremony. So we stayed in the barracks, and one of the sergeants had to stay with us. And my friend from Pennsylvania said to the sergeant, "You're so cute. I'd like to take you home to my family." And if you know sergeants in the military, you know that probably didn't go over too well. So we were doing a lot of push-ups that day, even though we weren't very well. But stuff like that kind of stands out in your memory. The funny things that happen.
And yeah, stories of what did you do? What happened when you were in the military?
Well, here's one story. So when I went to Vietnam, a lot of people that went to Vietnam went in big groups. So a whole plane would land, and all the people would go to a new unit there or whatever. So when I went there, though, I was coming from Japan to Vietnam, and when I got there, they stayed at a place called Tan Son Nhut Air Base in Saigon. At the time, was called Saigon, and stayed there for a couple days while they figured out where to send me in the country. And so I got the call. I was there for, I don't know, I went downtown, went out on the town, swam in the swimming pool, kind of had a little vacation. It's like, oh, Vietnam's not so bad. It's good. So anyway, I got on this plane with a group of guys, and we flew up to the northern part of South Vietnam and stopped at a couple places. The first place we stopped, I can't think of the name of it right now, but anyway, we stopped and we got off the plane, and there were a lot of soldiers that were in the infantry, and they were carrying bandoliers of ammunition around their shoulders and crossed, and knives and handguns, and it was like, oh my God, what's happening? This is for real, And so then we got back on that plane, flew further north, and we the first, I guess, fire that I ever experienced with the plane that I was on was being shot at with anti-aircraft weapons, and we could hear it. We couldn't really see out or anything, but just the pilot came on and said, "Oh yeah, we're being shot at. They're just a little too high for them to get us, but that's okay." So anyway, I landed, and everybody that was on the plane except me was coming back from vacation or whatever, and I got off and I walked off the plane. They had the kind of plane where the back end drops down and you walk out the back. So I walked out the back, and everybody else that was there took off. And so I was like, "Hi, I wonder where I should go," and there was no one. There was literally no one around. So I walked over this building. I was like, "Hello, is anybody in here?" And I didn't hear anything, and I thought, this is bizarre, It's like really, really weird. And so I think about 20 minutes passed, and finally some sergeant came up and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm supposed to be up here. I'm going over to this base. I was going to a radio research station at Phu Bai, Vietnam." And he said, "Oh, okay, we'll get you somebody to take you over there." So this guy comes up and in a Jeep, and I jump in the Jeep, and we start driving, and the guy won't talk to me, won't even look at me. And I thought, well, this is interesting. We're driving along in the base, and I'm seeing various things and just looking around. And so we get to the place we're going, and it's almost dark. And he stops and he just turns and looks at me. I'm like, okay, what do I do? And he said, get out. So I got out, and it was close enough to dark that I was like, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel right. And there was no one else around. It was like everybody else was out there somewhere. So I went into this building, and there were a few beds in there and stuff. No one else was there. So I thought, okay. And I just kind of hung out there, and I didn't know if it was blackout or, whether you could strike a match or not strike a match. And so I spent that night, the very first night, really disoriented, not knowing where anything was or what's going on. Next day I get up and I go outside, and again, there's hardly anyone around. It's like, wow, what's the deal here, So anyway, I wandered around for a little while, eventually found where I needed to go, but it didn't seem very organized. And it was kind of unsettling because you don't know where to go or what to do. You don't have a weapon. You don't have anything. So that was my first day in country, so to speak. Yeah.
How did you get into your position in the military?
It's a little bit okay. So my story is even a little more complicated because when the first time I went up to Des Moines and did my physical, that's the first thing you do is get a physical examination, and then they send you into this room and a recruiter talks to you. And I said, okay, I'll join instead of being drafted. And I said, I want to be in the artillery. And they're like, okay, we'll sign you up. So I signed up for that. And he said, we have the special program. This was in the summer of '68. So a lot of people were getting drafted, hundreds of thousands of people each month. So they said, we would prefer it if you didn't go in today. If you wanted to delay your enlistment for 120 days, then you could go home today, and then you could come back in 120 days, and we'll start your service as of today. So you'll start having, there's things like time and grade and all these different benefits that you get from joining. So I thought, well, I was a kid. I was like, oh, that sounds good. I'll go home for a while, and then I'll come back in October. So they sent me home. I came back in October and said, okay, I'm ready to go. And they said, well, you can't. The same thing happened. They kind of put you in this room right before you go into another room to swear in. It's kind of like this room here, actually, where you go into the other room then. But another recruiter said, you're the kind of person we've been looking for to do some special kind of work. So I was like, yeah, what kind of special kind of work? And he said, well, there's this thing called the Army Security Agency, which does a variety of tasks, but primarily is not the selling point was it's not the infantry, okay? So I was like, okay, it's not the artillery either. I don't know why I thought the artillery would be cool, but I thought it would be safer than the infantry, I guess, but I don't think either one was very safe. But anyway, so the person talked me into the one thing that you had to do was you had to sign up for 4 years instead of 3 if you went into this Army security thing, and they wouldn't tell you for sure what kind of job you had, but you could do language. Morse code is the area that I went into, and a variety of other things. So anyway, I said, okay, fine, I'll sign up for the 4 years. And he kind of sold me on that, the recruiter. So then they decide which AIT. Are you familiar with that term? Advanced Individual Training.
Oh, and
each job track that you get into, then there's a certain training thing. So I went to Fort Devens, Massachusetts, and went into what is formerly known, well, it's not really formal, it's called Diddy Bop School. So you learn Morse code. And actually, recently, just in the last couple of months, I went online and played some Morse code to myself just to think, do I still remember this stuff? Yeah, I can still do about 40 words a minute. So it's something you never forget. But even there, it was kind of fun, too, because I learned through computers. There was a computer program that was specially designed to teach Morse code. So I sat at a console, and there was a display in front of me with the alphabet. The sound would come through my ear, and I had a certain amount of time to press the right key, and if I didn't, it would come up and the correct one would come up. So you have to learn I had to learn how to copy or understand Morse code at 18 words per minute. That's the cutoff. If you can't do that, some people can't do that. If you can't do that, then you can't do the job I did. If you can do that, then they just put you forward into that job. And then that's where once I learned how to do that, then I was sent where they needed people to do that job.
What was your favorite place to go in the military?
I like Japan a lot, but Thailand was so beautiful, and I had some opportunities there that I didn't have in other places. I got to travel a lot. We weren't quite as when I went to Japan. We were literally working every day, and when I went to Vietnam, we worked every single day. The day off was I only worked 8 hours instead of 12. So, but in Thailand, we had a little bit better. We had time to go on trips and go to different places. And when I was in the northern part of Thailand as well, and when I finished my time and I was going to go home, I took a train from northern Thailand to Bangkok, and that's a nice long, few 100-mile journey through the country, and it's just so. I think by then I was in my 20s, and I was a little bit more attuned to being in other countries and just soaking up the tourist kind of thing, seeing what the countryside is like, interacting with the people, and how friendly. Well, that was another thing in all the places I went, Japan and Thailand, Vietnam too, but less interaction with the local people in Vietnam, of course. We did wonder, though, in Vietnam, we did wonder when the locals who cut hair and prepared food and did other things didn't come in for work. We were like, I wonder if something's up today, maybe not as safe as it would be. But anyway, the people around the world are so friendly. In Japan, if you were out on the town, if some Japanese soldiers came across you, they would say, we'll buy you all the beer you want if you talk English with us, and so on and so forth. So we had to learn how to hide from them. And
hide from them?
Yeah.
What, did they want to learn English?
Yeah, they wanted to speak English.
Oh.
Japanese people very interested in America and in English, and very friendly towards Americans, almost exclusively. So that was great. And in Thailand, the same thing. I mean, you're almost like a rock star just being an American compared to other people in the world. And in Thailand, we carried around a $20 bill in our pocket that would get us out of any trouble that could happen. So it's just a different world,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Now
So
$20.
I really enjoyed Thailand a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, back then $20 could probably buy you a car almost.
Yeah, almost. Yeah. When I got out, I bought a brand new car. That's one of the things I did. I treated myself. It cost $2,000 for a brand new car.
Now it's hundreds
You
of
can't get
thousands.
a used car for $2,000.
Yeah.
But yeah. The military that I served in, I consider to be the citizen army, where many draftees, of course, and a lot of people like me who enlisted when they got drafted or enlisted because they were interested in things, but they knew that they weren't going to have the military as their career, that they would serve their time and then go home. And that was one thing. The draftees served 2 years, enlistees in the Army served 3 years, and then I was in the Army Security Agency. That was 4 years, and the Navy and Air Force were 4 years, of course. But it was a very different environment. So I would say today to someone, pick your military occupational status, your MOS, carefully, because you can really get some super good training and experience. If you looked at the military as your career, you could choose, you could get pretty close to where you want to go, career-wise, and then spend however much time you can tolerate it. It's a challenging environment. You have to do things that you don't necessarily want to do, but I always thought it'd be interesting those super big planes like the CS-5A or whatever, these big cargo planes, the people who were the load masters on those. I thought that would be an interesting job. Maybe I would think about that now if I knew. Of course, they don't let first-time people. You can't just be an 18-year-old and say, I want to learn how to be the load master on a CS5 or whatever those things are called. I can't remember.
Big airplanes.
Big airplanes, yeah. And they're like, well, maybe you have to do something else first. But anyway, I would say career-wise, it's kind of an opportunity now that may not have been then.
You can build your
You can build your career. You can get a lot of training. I mean, even like medical training or tech training, AI. I mean, any of these new fields, the military would be a great place to get those.
Flying drones.
And flying drones, and that is a tough job, I think, though, psychologically. But the one incentive for me too was that I knew that if I wanted to go to college, and I had been accepted at a couple of universities actually when I signed up, but I wanted to go. At that time, the GI Bill was such that every month you served, you got a month of educational service in return. So that's why I know that 43 months so well, because I got 43 months of educational, paid for my college degree through using that. And that was a big incentive for me too. My parents had plenty of money, but they were like, we're not going to give it to you, but to go to school anyway. So that was a huge. I knew once I got out, I was going to go to college and use the GI Bill to get my education. So I would say think about those things. It's a good way to plan, and realize that the things we're asking the military to do today are pretty tough duty. Yeah.
It's a big job protecting us.
It is a big job to protect us, and it is a big job to put yourself in harm's way for the benefit of others. And yeah,
selflessness. That's what I think that is. What did you do after the military?
So after the military, I got out in the spring of '72, and I fooled around for most of that year. I did go to college in the spring semester of '73. So that was the rest of '72. I just kind of traveled around and got my yayas out, I guess, a little bit. Just visited people that I knew in the military and other things. And then in the spring of '73, I went to one semester of college. And at the end of that, I was like, this isn't what I thought I was going to be. And I moved to Colorado, actually. And I moved to Boulder in the summer of '73. And started working at a place called Arapahoe Chemicals, and worked there a couple of years, and then I went to the University of Colorado and graduated from there. So,
you went to, is it CSU? Is that what? Colorado State University? Is that the one you went to?
CU.
Oh, CU. Okay. Well, thank you for coming on.
You're welcome.
You have some amazing stories, and just again, thank you for your service. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.